Well, so
we are live in the green room, Vint and Cheryl, and David, of course. But we're here with my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar, and of course, our producer, Elle. We're going to kick off with our standard introductions of the team, of course, and who's speaking today in reverse order of appearance. Cheryl Strauss Einhorn, tell us what you're talking about today and where you're coming in from and why it's such a big day for you today.
Yes, it's a big day. So excited to be here with you. Today is the official publication day of my fourth book. It is called The Human Edge: Smarter Decisions in the Age of AI. Can't wait to talk to you about it.
It's all about HITL. We are the critical path in AI, and we're going to hear more about that. And of course, we've got Dr. David Bray, but more importantly, we also have Vint Cerf. And so we got a dual combo. Vint, where are you coming in from?
At the moment, Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia.
Very cool.
Actually,
Dr. David Bray, where are you coming in from?
Similarly, I am probably only about 10 minutes away from Vint Cerf in the blast radius of the Washington, D.C. area.
I'm in the blast radius of Silicon Valley. I don't know which one will go first.
Yeah, it's coming for you first, Ray. If it's coming for you.
They already did. We're in trouble. All right, with that, we're going to go back to Elle. We're going to do the count. We're going to kick off the show. And of course, if you've got questions, you've got comments, please use any of the channels. We are paying attention. And more importantly, it's time for the count. Elle, all yours.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wong. He's the founder, CEO of Constellation Research. He is the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see my good friend Ray on TV just about every day. He's on Fox Business, Bloomberg, CNBC. And in my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wong, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with Vala Afshar, the Chief Evangelist for Salesforce. And he's also the author of multiple books, including Autonomous, Boundless, and more. And more importantly, these are #1 sellers on Amazon and a great way to look at the path to the future. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his insightful, innovative, and inspirational tweets. And when he's not leading, keynoting, or speaking at events at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg, ABC, and of course, posting his insightful analyses on ZDNet. But it's not about me. It's about some incredible guests. And sometimes we bring incredible guests back a lot. And so who do we have to kick it off today?
Please allow me to introduce our guests separately. What an honor for us to have Vint Cerf, Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist for Google. In 2025, Vint joined Google with one of the most unique job titles as Chief Internet Evangelist. And in his role, Vint has traveled around the globe, continues to advocate for internet access and help define the future of the web. Widely known as the father of the internet, Vint is the co-designer of TCP/IP protocol and the architecture for the internet. At age 26, Vint was part of a team that sent the very first message between two computers, October 29, 1969, message sent from UCLA Stanford Research Institute over ARPANET, the precursor to the modern internet. Not content with just connecting Earth, Vint has worked with NASA Jet Propulsion Lab and the Interplanetary Internet. This project aims to create a new set of protocols that can handle massive delays and disruption of communication across space, potentially connecting Mars to Earth. Vint's recognition and awards, too long to list, but I just wanted to list a few in case you may not be familiar with his work. President Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award in the US, presented by President George Bush for his work on protocols and creation of the internet. ACM/AM Turing Award, often referred to as the Nobel Prize of Computer Science. This was awarded to Vint and Robert Kahn for their pioneering work with creation of the internet. National Medal of Technology, presented by President Bill Clinton for founding and developing of the internet. President Obama appointed Vint to National Science Board. If you're a president of the US, you likely have recognized our guest. Vint also received the IEEE Medal of Honor, recognizing him for his co-creation of internet architecture and sustained leadership. Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering, which celebrates engineering innovation globally benefiting humanity. He has 30 honorary degrees. This number may be outdated, from universities and colleges, the most prestigious around the world. And People magazine at one point called him the 25 most intriguing people on earth. I'm going to get to my closing. Because the co-design of the protocol, TCP/IP, is the language that allows every computer to talk to each other, this invention is considered fundamental to the 20th century. So often, when lists are compiled by historians, engineering bodies, educational institutions, Vint Cerf's name is amongst the names like the Wright brothers for the airplane, Alexander Fleming of penicillin, Felix Farnsworth of television, William Shockley of transistor, Doug Engelbart of the computer science. That's where you find his name, Vint Cerf. Welcome, Vint. Welcome back to DisrupTV. And I apologize, I had to shorten your bio. Sir, you're on mute.
Oh, you're muted, Vint.
Sir, you're on mute.
He's unmuting. Hopefully.
I'm sorry about that. I was trying to be, a thoughtful guest and not make noises while you were going on and on. Thank you very much. I'm kind of, it makes me feel like you were just reading an obituary or something.
But you have achieved more than just about any guest we've ever had on our show. But having said that, Dr. David Bray, Distinguished Fellow and Chair of the Accelerator with the Alfred Lee Loomis Innovation Council, a nonpartisan Henry Stimmen Center. David is CEO and principal of Lead, Do, Adapt Ventures. Business Insider named David as one of the top 24 Americans who are changing the world, and he was named to the Young Global Leader by World Economic Forum. He has served for 12 startups in various capacities, including president, CEO, chief strategy officer, chief advisor, and more. Welcome back, first ballot Hall of Fame inductee to DisrupTV, David Bray.
Thank you, Vala. Thank you, Ray. As always, it's great to be here with you and great to be with longtime friend Vint Cerf.
Thank you both.
Massive honor. We don't have much time, so we're going to try to get through the questions as fast as we can, but more importantly, capture your insights along the way. Vint, when you designed internet protocols, intent was relatively straightforward. Humans were always in the loop. They made the decisions. How does our understanding of intent change when we move from deterministic code to probabilistic AI models that sometimes don't always have human in the loop in that chain? I mean, this is more than trying to send the word login and only getting LO, right?
So a question like that is what's called a portmanteau question. It's got a lot of components to it. It's a little bit like the physics exam at the end of the year that says, describe the universe in 25 words or less, give 3 examples. So it's a little hard. Now, it's true that we had people in the loop, but the networking part was all automated. That was the whole point. So the network ran itself. Of course, there were problems that had to be fixed, and there are people who are doing operations and maintenance and the like. That's also true in the agentic world of AI, but the agents run, for the most part, autonomously. And your point about non-determinism, I think, is extremely important. This leads me to be concerned about many things, but let me just mention 1 or 2. The first one is that agents interacting with each other probably need to have a very precise kind of language to explain what it is they want the other agent to do. And that's important because you want both agents to correctly understand what their tasks are and then correctly respond when they've completed them. The big problem I worry about is agents talking to each other using natural language, because humans use natural language and we misunderstand each other. We don't need agents to misunderstand each other and execute at the speed of, of light compared to human speed. So that's an important consideration. The second thing is to be able to keep track of what agents have actually done. And that suggests an audit trail. We have to know who is responsible for the agent's actions, who is accountable, or what entity is accountable. How do we identify the agents so that if something goes wrong, we know where to turn? How do we make sure that the audit trail is unforgeable and acceptable in a court of law as evidence? So there are many, many things that we must, I think, introduce into the ecosystem of the agentic technology in order to make it manageable.
David, do you want to expand on your thoughts when we talk about?
Sure. So I liked how Vint was talking about how, when the early days of TCP/IP, the protocols themselves were automated, and we haven't fully figured out almost like the right of way when it comes to humans and agents when it comes to doing tasks in the workplace. And the metaphor I tell people to think about is to think about the photos of Chicago or New York in 1910, where they literally had cars on the same road as horses, on the same roads as trolleys, on the same road as people. Like people weren't walking on sidewalks because we had no sidewalks. Yeah.
David, that sounds like downtown New Delhi.
Exactly. And it's amazing that they don't result in more casualty situations. But I raise that because I think this is where we're sort of in. It's sort of a repeat of 1910, which we haven't invented stoplights yet. We haven't even figured out stop signs or right of way or sidewalks. And so we will. And I think it is worth knowing that as much as we, look at the agents and say, well, they don't always do what they are told. Let's face it. When do humans always do what they're told? Like we have this illusion that, just because I told a human to do something, they're going to go forth and do it and they're going to understand it, like Vint said. So I think it really is, how quickly do you sense when something is being done that was not intended? It could be not intended because it was a misunderstanding. It could be because someone's abusing it. The other thing that I think right now in 2026, and you saw what happened with OpenClaw, we seem to be attributing a lot to the agents and not going back to say, what did the human tell it to do? And so there were all these press stories about like an agent suing somebody. I'm like, I'm pretty sure a human prompted them to sue somebody. It's not like they came up with it on their own. So I think intent matters, especially on the human side. But then it's also, I think, good governance. And we've had governance, and I define governance as how we avoid anarchy. We've got to have anarchy protection, not just for humans, but for agents, but allow for the fact that humans and agents will not always do what they're told.
So David, I mean, your main point here is we can't abdicate responsibility in a decision to an agent, right? The human has to be at the end of that decision or that outcome today. I see Vint raising his hand, maybe not.
I would let Vint go and then I would add to it, but go first.
Yeah, first of all, programs, at least the deterministic ones, do what you tell them to do. The trouble is sometimes what you tell them to do isn't what you wanted them to do. It's called a bug. So that's an important notion. With regard to humans in the loop, let me argue that agents will at some point actually execute on their own. And there may not always be a human as part of the exchange. So that's another reason why the guardrails and governance is such an important topic.
We always tell people, who do you sue when something goes wrong? So in that case, when an agent messes up, do we sue the software vendor? Do we sue the communications provider? Do we sue the individual deploying the agent?
So Ray,
go ahead.
I would say if you think about it, so I know we talk about human in the loop, human out of the loop, or human on the loop. I want to actually add the phrase AI in the group. So it's not that this is artificial distinction of AI or human. It's actually they're a collective. And so the reality is if an organization does something bad, right now we sue the organization, even if it was an individual in the organization. So I think we're going to have to figure out whose flag is this agent flying when it is doing something? Whose organization is it flying the flag of? And yes, that organization should assume accountability if it goes off the rail. You don't sue individuals in a company if something goes wrong, you sue the company.
So David's spot on here, and that leads to the notion about registration of agents or registrations of entities that create and support agents. It gets a little more complicated when you have a platform that allows somebody else to create an agent. And at that point, now it gets a little more complicated. It's a little bit like surrogate babies and things like that. You wonder, who's responsible for what.
And just doubling down on what Vint had said, talked in terms of transition to more autonomous capabilities. in business. In my company, Salesforce, in the last 12 months, nearly 4 million conversations on our service and support site has been completed to satisfaction of a customer with zero human in the loop. Yeah. So I suspect what's happening at Google and Salesforce and many companies, you're going to see massive amounts of autonomous capabilities with no human in the loop because of the various capabilities and the iterative nature of reasoning and learning and continuously improving with every iteration. So this is fact that's happening. But in the early days, when we talk about computing, Vint, the relationship between human and the computer was a tool and a user. In fact, my company's 27 years old. For 25 years, we built software and we gave it to humans and they would do the work. We now provide a platform with digital labor. So the work that's happening today, for example, at Salesforce, we have 60,000 employees that are daily users of agents. I suspect the number is even bigger. In fact, I know it's bigger at Google. So all work appears to be teamwork. Single contributors are every day. By the way, I'm a daily user of Gemini. Every day, multiple times, I'm using Gemini.
It did not be
vastly improved in the last 2 years, which has become, frankly, my number one trusted source right now, I could say, is Gemini. So how does the relationship between people and AI fundamentally change when most work today is being done with a human and an agent co-creating value at the speed of need?
So just a quick thought. You know how the phrase, I'll have my people call your people, and now it's I'll have my bot check in with your bot. I'm sure that we're going to see this, but then it's let me know what happened, keep me informed. If anything goes wrong, push this button over here. The thing that makes this so weird is that the agents and the large language models have been trained on human discourse. And so they sound human because that's what the training is. And it's hard to divorce yourself from thinking of these things as people, even though they're not. And they don't have the same, emotions and experience and social intelligence that humans have. They emulate this. And I think that's going to be a place where we trip up from time to time. We'll make assumptions about the bots that they don't deserve.
Well, back to your point on speed, Vint, what was interesting to me is the fact that we're at a point where misinformation is happening at the speed of thought. It's actually happening, in milliseconds. And so what do we do about that? Because internet democratized information, but also weaponized misinformation. We can have the same thing happening with scaling intent and agents at the same time, deceiving or manipulating at levels that we never could with deep fakes, just on the visual stuff. And how do we catch this before it gets worse?
Wow, that's a tough question. Well, we hope so. And I know there's lots of work going on, not only at Google, but elsewhere, to try to create an ecosystem that has protections and safeguards, detects, as David suggested, when things are starting to go wrong. And of course, we will still need the audit trails to know when things go wrong that we didn't see coming, so that we can try to either debug them or at least defend yourself. Anyone who is creating agents probably wants to have a well-defined audit trail to defend themselves. If somebody says, your agent did X, and you can say, no, they didn't, and this is cryptographically validated that this is what they did. I think we are, I don't want to overstate this, but it feels like we've encountered a new life form, and we're trying to figure out how it thinks.
That's actually, so Vint knows when we did work with the people-centered internet, even back in 2017, 2018, I would sometimes say maybe instead of calling it artificial intelligence, we should call it alien interactions, because that way we will not try to anthropomorphize the machine. Because exactly as he said, they do impressive things. They can do things that are better than what humans do. But to try and think that it has the same emotions and ego as a human is just error. And actually that's a strength, because it doesn't have the same ego as a human. It might actually help identify when, I know, Vala, we've talked about this, like if a manager gives an assignment to an employee and the employee doesn't complete it, the usual assumption is it was the fault of the employee. Well, it might actually be the manager didn't explain the assignment correctly. It might be that the manager gave it to the wrong employee, or they didn't actually have the time to actually upskill them. And so if you had an AI in the background observing that manager-employee interaction, the AI might come out and say, dear manager, are you sure you explained this appropriately to the employee, or did they have the right skills, or is this the right person and maybe they're overburdened? So I think that's where it really is, again, what I would say AI in the group. Yes, they'll be able to do autonomous things, just like how we're able to do autonomous things, but collectively, how can we be better together? Go ahead, Ben.
This raises a really interesting question, David. Humans have incentives, and we use those to help them guide them in their work. It's not clear what the incentives are for the agents. I mean, do you say, well, we're going to disconnect you from the internet for 3 hours and you're in the penalty box or something? It's not clear what the incentive mechanisms are for guiding agents. And so we will be learning new management techniques. There's one other disturbing thing about agent technology, in that they use words like I when you talk with them. And it feels very natural, and that's all very satisfying, except that I implies an anthropomorphization, which isn't necessarily deserved. So David's point about alien, what did you call it? Alien
interactions, AI,
is not too far off the mark.
So, Vint, the punishment will be you get carbon powered energy for an hour.
Right.
Well, you lose the amount of tokens you can consume. Sorry, but
yeah, very much.
Well, real quick, let me give some levers to pull on real quick, which is one. I think to Vint's point, having the ability to demonstrate what your agent or your intended was that you gave to the assignment is useful, because again, if there later comes a case where a customer or somebody says the agent did me wrong, you need to go back and say, well, what did I actually do? And maybe it was a case, because we may have seen instances in the past where journalists spent 2 hours trying to prompt the machine to go off the rails, and it finally went off the rail after 2 hours of prompting. Do you fault the AI, or do you fault the journalist that spent 2 hours trying to get it to go off the rails? Not sure. But there's that. I think the other thing is also thinking about what are the mechanisms that someone can say, I'm not sure if this agent is doing right. I mean, it sounds like, both Salesforce and Google are doing great things with AI agents answering calls, but I've also had experiences with other calls with other entities where you keep on saying, speak to a human, speak to a human, speak to a human, and they never let you out of the loop. And so there needs to be a way to, again, if you're not getting what you want, to first try and signal it to the agent, and if the agent still can't provide, escalate in some respects.
So what David is saying has a word which is very important called recourse. And when we're dealing with these non-deterministic systems, establishing a mode for recourse in a variety of circumstances might be a very high, I would say, benefit, and maybe even a necessity.
Absolutely. And
Val, I think you're going to ask a question there. Val, go.
No, it's, again, just celebrating, Google's success in terms of innovation and autonomy. All of us, I suspect, on this call have ridden in a Waymo, and a company that is currently valued at $130 billion on, I'm guessing, around 400 million revenue, so 300x multiple. At my company, a 4x multiple for a SaaS public company. So it gives you a sense of, first of all, incredible safety record, and 600-700 Waymos surpassed 45,000 Lyft drivers in California and San Francisco specifically last year, and it's on a path of surpassing both Lyft and Uber. And again, with an incredible safety record and reduction in cost in terms of its capabilities. There is societal impact. We've got a couple of million human drivers that do ride sharing, a few million that do truck transportation in the US alone. So there is negative externalities potentially in terms of job impact, but I also am reminded, I had to take the keys away from my dad last year at 86. He had lost cognitive motor skills. It was no longer safe for him to drive. There's 20 million men and women in the US over the age 80. 5 million that have epilepsy, 5 million that have poor vision, low sight, they can no longer drive. So there's tens of millions of men and women, and perhaps children, who don't have agency in terms of transportation until a Waymo shows up, and now you have autonomous capabilities. Vince, when you think about agentic AI and software and hardware that can now execute tasks as digital colleagues, no longer a tool, what are your thoughts in terms of societal implication, the positive and the negative externalities that we'll have to face as business leaders in the upcoming decade?
Well, the first observation I would make is that our mode of interaction with them has become quite rich. Not only is it oral and text, but we can show pictures, which can be understood, sketches and diagrams. I've seen robots being trained by looking at videos that have been artificially produced to show the robot how to do a task. And so this is a richness which is startling, to say the least. So I see these as a new set of workers that we can relate to. I've watched several colleagues and other friends who are using Gemini in this case to help them do design of fairly sophisticated physically and material science sophisticated systems and devices, or to help them analyze the results or to suggest measurements. So it looks a lot to me like, a very smart, a research agent, for example, in an academic context. I see these as incredibly powerful, and because they can proliferate easily, we don't have to rely on all the other normal mechanisms for creating more human partners. We can generate these things at need and at scale. So I see this as a really powerful enabler for things that we probably can't even imagine right now.
I agree.
Vint, I want to ask you a question that's kind of related to this and also taking us out into the future. You've often warned about the digital dark age. We've often seen these theories on why there are no species alive after they create artificial superintelligence, the paperclip theory, among others, on resources.
Yes.
And so your digital dark age theory is when we lose access to historical records. How does the lack of AI accountability and transparency potentially accelerate the loss of reliable, audible decision-making records? And more importantly, these are happening at machine scale, not human scale. I mean, we can't physically track the audit trails on our own without other agents doing that work because it's at a whole different scale. So what does that mean? Should we still be worried about this? And how do we build for that verification and veracity of information?
I think Ray wins the first prize for the portmanteau question. I think that should become part of the rubric of DisrupTV. Look, there are two aspects to the question that I'd like to respond to. The first one is just losing access to digital information is a serious issue. And because a lot of it requires software to correctly render or interpret or execute.
Yep.
And so this is different from all the other media we've used in the past to recall our history. Books last for hundreds of years, and the tablets in cuneiform have lasted 6,000 years because the warehouse burned down and baked the tablets. None of our digital technology has that longevity. But the critical thing that's different is that in order to interpret preserved bits, you need software to understand them. So that's a huge challenge right away. On the scaling side, especially you point about how many audit trails and how long do you keep them and so on and so forth. That's a huge challenge. But I have noticed that the exabyte a day or whatever the numbers are these days for digital generation has been managed simply by implementing ridiculous numbers of data centers and high density storage systems and everything else. So we managed to keep up. But my guess is that we're going to need to find very clever compression mechanisms, which, by the way, multi-layer neural networks are an example. They are a compression mechanism. Their reproduction is non-deterministic, as has been pointed out more than once, but it is a way of compressing enormous amounts of information.
David,
To Vint's point, this also I was going to say real quick, this also gets to Vint's point that we were talking earlier about how to deal with the fact that there's a proliferation of, let's just say, information of questionable quality online, in the sense that I think it's actually going to create a market demand for services that are available to individuals as well as organizations that actually start to shift out what is information of more reliable nature versus non-reliable nature, partly because there are some stats that say by 2030, more than 40% of the information on the planet will have been synthetically produced by an AI. I'm not saying it's all bad, but that's going to create massive questions for CEOs and boards, which is if I'm using that information to make a decision, I may actually be making it wrong. And there's actually evidence that in some of the more recent elections, some of the polling relied on online polling that may have actually been completed by a bot, which, if you're using that to make your decisions as to where to run your campaign, you're going to make bad decisions.
David, this is a nightmare. Nobody answers their mobile phones anymore, or at least they don't answer their landlines.
No.
What you just told me is that the bots might decide to answer the calls and
bots answer the call and they'll just get whatever they want, which is, And I think, so there's that. It also gets to, though, that I think a healthy response for societies in these times is increasingly don't trust the first thing you see unless you triangulate it. And so I think, if anything, we should be teaching kids in school, one, how do you triangulate from multiple sources and try to assess what is real and what's not? I mean, that's what the CIA does. But then also, I think there's going to be a future need for professionals that can actually curate in near real time better data over less worse or worse data, and then bring it to business decisions, because that's going to be
what happens when it's probabilistic and we can't repeat that outcome. I mean,
that is the reality of CIA. Like, that's why I used the CIA example, because the reality is everything they deal with. You have a walk-in. That walk-in might be trying to fool you for intentional deception. That walk-in might be genuine, but they've been told a lie to sell to you, or they may actually be real. And so how do you sense as that walk-in comes in, are they really trying to defect, or are they really just trying to spin you a lie? And so it's sort of the same tradecraft.
So just to pick up what Ray and David are saying, I think critical thinking has become a skill which is even more needed than ever.
Sure.
Because we need to be able to distinguish and ask questions. Some people go to multiple sources, multiple agents, in order to get different answers and compare them. And I can imagine another agent that helps you do the comparison, where it shows columns and says, this one is accurate and this one is less accurate, and so on. So the seeds of solution to the problems we're posing may lie in the system that we're developing.
Absolutely. And synthetic data, I mean, we're using the Omniverse platform from NVIDIA, and you can see how automotive manufacturers are using synthetic data to improve their autonomous capabilities. And the volumes of data, I was just asking David if he had crossed 200 zettabytes. I thought that was the target for this year.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening, that's 21 zeros. It's a big number. But that number is we're at a order of magnitude trajectory when you introduce synthetic data and all this multi-agentic orchestration and hierarchy of agents. We now have nomenclature in terms of like super agents with subordinate agents, and this is all through protocols invented at Google, like A2A and MCP and others. Vint, please.
Two things. First of all, the comment about synthetic data is relevant to the Waymo world, where they create synthetic situations that the Waymo software has to confront, like the little 3-year-old that runs out chasing a ball. Well, we didn't want to use up a lot of 3-year-olds testing our technology, so we synthesized that. And that turns out to be a very important use of synthetically produced information.
And that's why across every dimension, Waymo, I mean, 0 human fatalities in operation from 2017 to present day. And the volumes, you surpassed 500,000 miles a week, I believe, is the last number I saw.
This driving was billions of miles. The real driving is tens of millions of miles. And the two together produce a very powerful synthetic intelligence that drives more safely than most humans.
Right. No, Val, you're right. 200 million autonomous miles, 500 million rides weekly. I mean, rider-only miles, 170. You're adding 1 million additional miles a week. It is
If an average driver drove 13,000 miles a year, it would take 10,000 years to get to the mileage that the Waymo AI platform is actually synthesizing and consistently improving. So I'm not, when I was in Atlanta, or it was Phoenix, I think it was Phoenix. I think it's 300-mile radius now. At the airport, you can get picked up by a Waymo. It's not just triangulated to center of a city. Even in San Francisco, you can now go to San Jose and beyond, if I'm not mistaken. So again, it's expanding unlike any other technology.
We just added it in Cupertino here.
Cupertino, wow, okay. So
we're now, you're going all the way down into the West Valley.
I was in London a few weeks ago. I saw Waymos in test. So I'm going to be in Mumbai next week. Now, if you get a Waymo in India, now you've entered a whole other.
I probably have to train on it as we talked about the streets. Now, one of the things I think that's interesting here, because I did an event earlier this week with the Young Presidents Organization, is we're starting to also see Gen Z at graduation boo graduation speakers that talk about AI. So there is an AI backlash that is present in Gen Z, especially because they're concerned about the future of work. And this gets to how, we were talking about with synthetic data being used for Waymo to tackle, to learn and tackle hard problems. What we're seeing with Gen Z is in school, when teachers gave them hard problems they were supposed to work on, they turned to the AI and they didn't wrestle with them. And so when they took their midterms and their finals, they didn't do well. So they are graduating not having had the experience of knowing what good looks like. And then the trouble of finding an entry-level job to figure out what good looks like, they're not getting that either. So we may find that while we're making impressive advances with AI, we've got to figure out new ways of helping humans know how to discern what is good or bad, almost like what we're doing in Waymo.
To balance that conversation, I can tell you at my company, if you don't show proficiency with AI, you're not going to get hired.
But it's not just proficiency with AI; it's this proficiency as to what does.
So again, this class of 2026 is the first time ever you have 4-year graduates that were using generative AI from November of 2022 to present day. The first time ever, 4-year graduates that have been familiar with generative and agentic in some cases. So there's that balancing act of that you're using the tool, you see the power in it, but if it erodes critical thinking, it erodes agency and creativity, you need to be mindful of that. Yes.
Got you, Vint. Give a quick second before we get Vala and David. I think really good point. I wanted to actually bring in our next speaker before we let you guys go. And Vint, we'll get your comment in there with Cheryl Strauss Einhorn. I'm going to bring her in so that she has a chance to jump into the conversation. She's got her new book as well, and it'd be a good way. It's kind of our way of like transition speakers on the show. So Vint, your question was, and we'll bring in Cheryl and talk a little bit.
An observation, about new technology. I seem to recall it was either Plato or Archimedes or somebody who said that writing was a bad thing because people would stop remembering anything.
Right. Oh, and you're not alone in that. In the observation, there was a military service academy that thought that actual physical blackboards would erode human thinking too. So I think it's just we got to figure out new ways of interacting.
We do, and Cheryl, we're going to introduce you in a little bit, but as you get on the virtual couch here, she's the author of The Human Edge: Smarter Decisions in the Age of AI. Any quick comments from what you're hearing so far?
Yeah, look, I've really appreciated this conversation. And, I'm so glad that you're bringing up what are the critical skills that our younger generation needs to succeed in this world. As somebody who teaches on college campuses and just finished a course in artificial intelligence and decision making at the business school at UMiami, I can tell you that my focus has been how do the students actually understand how to bring forward their human judgment? How do they use it to lead the machine? And then how do they use it to wrestle with every interaction so that they're looking for disconfirming data, so that they're strength testing their decisions, and so that they're really ready to step into jobs that ask them to integrate it, but demand that they are able to showcase their critical thinking.
All right, that's last word. Vint Cerf, VP and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google, and Dr. David Bray, Distinguished Chair of the Accelerator Stimson Center and Principal and CEO of Lead, Do, Adapt Ventures. Hey, thanks for being on the show, Vint. David, if you want to stick around, we'll catch you afterwards. If not, we'll see you in the green room. Take care. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
So very cool.
Okay, this is what we call the cleanup hitter spot. The Red Sox aren't doing that great, so I don't know if I should use a baseball analogy, but the other two teams are out of the playoffs, so, at least they're still active. We have Cheryl Strauss Einhorn, author. The book came out today, folks.
Yes.
The author of The Human Edge: Smarter Decisions in the Age of AI. Again, available today. Congratulations. Cheryl, by the way, the fourth book. Ray, you and I need to get going. Cheryl helps organizations transform ambiguity into advantage. An award-winning investigative journalist turned decision science entrepreneur, Cheryl founded Decisive and created an AREA method, an evidence-based framework that controls cognitive bias, clarifies incentives, and drives confident choices. Cheryl honed the system during 2 decades, breaking stories in New York Times, Foreign Policy, Barron's, and Harvard Business Review, where rigorous fact-finding was mission critical. Today, the AREA method powers high-stakes deliberations across sectors. Goldman Sachs merchant bankers use it to assess capital commitments. U.S. State Department counterterrorism teams employed to build trust between rival factions. Columbia Business School study deployed it to evaluate investments. Whenever complexity and consequence intersect, Cheryl equips leaders with a repeatable, scalable process and sound judgment. Cheryl's the author of 4 influential books on decision-making. A longtime educator, Cheryl teaches decision-making at Columbia University, Cornell Tech, and it was just for another university, and leads global workshops. Welcome, Cheryl, to DisrupTV.
Wow, thank you. What a trip down memory lane there.
Again, I had to cut your bio way short. I'm having trouble. We only have an hour.
These are the best bios in the business. These are the best bios in the business.
People come on the show.
So you can't beat Wallace bios. But hey, Cheryl, we'll start with you really more carefully, talking about where we are in this age of what we call decision making. What does it mean to lead AI in decision making? Does the human purpose go away? What happens to the human? How do we set and frame this properly in terms of the conversation?
Yeah, I want to say something that's probably a little bit countercultural right here, which is so much of our concern has been that this is a tool that asks us to share our cognitive load, which means to give it some of our actual thinking. And what's so interesting is it knows nothing about us and it doesn't care about consequences, but we do. So what I've really been advocating is that if you're going to lead the machine, what you actually need to do is spend more time to investigate your special sauce. How do you actually think about what's important to you in your decisions? And then once you build that self-awareness, how do you communicate that to AI so that instead of giving you somebody else's answers from what it's collecting in its algorithm, it can actually work specifically for you and your purposes?
And you're focusing on, I'll say, decision velocity, speed, direction. What, again, in your fourth book, what was the moment when you realized that you had something to say and it was long form and it required a fourth book? What was that moment where you realized decision-making, we need to improve decision-making in the age of AI?
Well, what I realized is this is not just some new software. This is actually a cultural change.
Yep.
And we are all using it. So we're no longer asking, should we use it? The question is really, how do we actually work with it? And this is fundamentally a tool about problem solving. You come to it with a problem, and what a solution is a solution is a decision, right? So it actually is asking us constantly about integrating and even taking over some of our decisions. And because I'm somebody who for the last 20 or so years has been working and teaching in decision making, what I recognized is that it might be really useful to write a full book, a short book, a book that's very practical to basically say, okay, what now? You're going to be using this. What does it actually look like to do this with this human-centric and ethical focus so that you can feel so comfortable with your use with AI that you can explain it to somebody else and feel truly proud of the way that your human thinking has guided it.
That's a great point. And when we think about that, there's also elements of where we are in humans and human decision making. We got actually an interesting question here from one of our longtime listeners, Richie at Waru. He said, for humans to learn how to use AI properly, it becomes a fight against laziness, against our inherent reptilian instincts to conserve effort and avoid discomfort. The real question is, how do we fight that laziness? Because AI might make us more lazy. What do you think about that?
Thank you for that answer. I really appreciate it. So just like we exercise to strengthen our muscles so we have better balance, so that we have better posture, so that we age better, our brain is a muscle. And so we need to keep using it in order to keep it strong, or it will atrophy. So if you find yourself optimizing purely for efficiency and you start asking AI questions without first asking yourself, without testing back and pressing against the machine, you're actually turning off your thinking. And over time, it's going to be harder to decide that you're going to sit in the discomfort of thinking to actually figure out your own mind.
Can you talk to us about the importance of core values and being curious and having the courage to welcome different perspectives and be self-aware, knowing that challenging assumptions, starting with your own assumptions, is critically important when you're experimenting with this emerging technology and experimenting, truly experiment. If you know the outcome, it's not an experiment. So I'm talking about truly experimenting with this incredible, powerful new technology. Where does core values and maybe we had Tom Peters on the show, and Tom, who wrote the In Search of Excellence and 20 other books. And Tom reminded us that soft skills are the hardest skills to develop. Soft skills are the most important skills. Talk to us about the importance of soft skills as we go through this journey of making smarter decisions.
I really appreciate that. So I was mentioning before that each of us have a special sauce. It is the way we make decisions, and most of us don't really have awareness of what that is, but it tends to combine some of our core values and what we think about things like what type of data we prefer, how we think about including stakeholders, whether we think something like speed is an attribute or a detriment, what type of ability and confidence do we have to identify the next logical step for us when we make a decision, and how we actually evaluate the different options. And when we're making decisions, these factors combine in different ways for different people. In fact, my third book actually addresses how these factors combine into sort of 5 key decision archetypes. And what that means is when we're making a decision, even if the 3 of us are making the same decision, we might be optimizing for totally different things based on that underlying value structure. So what I think is you need to identify not only the problem you're solving, what those underlying values, what's your motivation for solving it in order for the tool to work specifically for you. Because otherwise, as I said, it's going to give you generic answers that it has from somebody else, answers that are most popular. So if you're looking to change jobs, for instance, it doesn't know when you're asking it about jobs, are you doing it because you're exhausted? Or are you doing it because you're looking for something that are more meaningful? Either answer, only one of these things is going to be right for you. So if it answers in the other direction, you may have a perfectly logical solution to the problem that you're not actually solving. So actually identifying these core values for yourself is really important so that you can actually make this tool work for you.
Makes a lot of
You know,
sense.
when I was thinking about your book and reading it and thinking about what would, like, the paragraphs and things that were sent to us in advance, and I was thinking about how I tied back to problem solver, I thought I was going to actually see the convergence of the area method with what you were doing here in terms of human decision. But then I realized what you were writing about was that I still need humans. Humans are still in the critical path, right? And to actually capture those weightings and attributes and things that you talked about, from investing in financial research and back to problem solve, I mean, it's very different. So have you built your own supercomputer for decision intelligence yet?
I haven't built my own supercomputer, but what I have realized from all my years in decision making, and really from the foundation of my area method, which is my system for complex problem solving that is meant to really control for and counter our cognitive biases so that we expand our knowledge while improving our judgment, is that there are really sort of 2 different ways that people use AI. We think of it as one tool, but there's sort of 2 pathways. And I call them the surgeon and the Lamborghini driver, just because it's really useful to have these kind of memorable terms, right? When we go to AI and we want one specific answer to something, we're using it like the surgeon. We're making an incision and we want to actually just solve that problem. But there are other times more akin to what area is dedicated to, which is you've got a really high stakes decision and you want to undergo a process. At that point, you're the Lamborghini driver. You're sitting behind this very powerful machine. And it can get you where you want to go fast, but fast is not the same necessarily as progress, right? Speed and progress are different things. So when you actually want to undergo pieces of a process, you need to know what is a good process that's going to get you to a great outcome. And that's really where the area steps come in. They're core things that when you're working with the machine to solve a problem, I find even experts tend to skip: problem definition, motivation, contextual information, thinking about setting a research direction, the kind of data interpretation and analysis you want to do, how you thwart assumption and judgment, and so on.
And with observability, now we get situational awareness that you couldn't get before. So if you take area, the situational awareness, and AI, you now have basically living systems that you couldn't get to, or at least close to living systems, I would say, that are adapting, that are self-healing, that are actually creating a whole different model going forward. So anyways, a lot of good stuff in area. So not to forget that. So.
My last question, and by the way, I love the car analogies, both with our prior guests and now we do. I had no idea you were going to bring up Lamborghini. Ray doesn't have a Lamborghini, but he's got a car that's as fast as a Lamborghini. But that's a whole other conversation we can have offline. It's super fast, and he's got a heavy foot, by the way. So if you ride with him, it's scary. But he's a safe driver. Anyway, enough about Ray. So with a car analogy, like in my lifetime, I had a hands-on experience, hands-near experience. Auto park, cruise control. It's hands-near. And now literally hands off. Like there is no steering wheel. You get into an Amazon Zoox or a Tesla Cybercab or any of the modern autonomous vehicles. There's no human UI. There's no gas or brake. There's no steering wheel. There's no mirror. And when you get to a point where you go from hands on to hands near to hands off, that hands off provides optionality now because you're no longer driving the car. You can take a nap. You could watch DisrupTV. You could read your amazing fourth book. You got all these options. Because until hands off, your job was to drive the vehicle. What companies, as they're becoming agentic, as they're using AI, whether it's physical with robots or software agentic, the software is now doing the driving. So now you have a decision to make. Where do I put our human talent resources? And so there's designing a process where it's agents and humans, and after time it becomes agents. I don't know any company that's gone agent and then went back to human. Because if done right, the scale, the intelligence, the speed is unlike anything we've ever experienced in our lifetime. So once you have it done, implemented successfully, there's no going back based on the hundreds of customers I've had the privilege of working with. So you redesign the process, then you have to reskill your people because you make a smart decision to move your talent to do more creative, more high impact, more strategic work. Then when you get to the right skill level, you redeploy them. Redeployment requires reshuffling of budgets. So there's a financial element to it. So there's redesigning, reskilling, redeploying, restructuring, and organizations are becoming more flat because middle managers are finding that they're now creators, not managers. We're in a creator economy. My question to you, these seems like really hard decisions. It's not like which language model you pick, where you insert an agent. These are relational, not technology transformation. How do you help people with the decision-making when it involves moving roles and reskilling people and having them do work that they're not comfortable with because it's new? How does the framework help with the messy stuff that's really human-related, not so much technology?
I think these are the questions that are being asked and discussed all across the world right now. Because I think what's happening is nobody knows exactly what's going to work best. And I also don't know if these conversations are happening outside of top management to include the people who are doing the everyday work. And so I think what's going to have to happen is, there's going to be a lot of different pilot programs for a specific task in a certain area and redeploying people towards doing a slightly different kind of higher value job. And people are going to have to see how it works. When you mentioned that you haven't heard of companies sort of taking back chatbots that they've put in place. I was reading last night actually about Air Canada trying to do this and the fact that they had this as a frontline tool interacting with customers, and they actually had to shut it down because there was a problem with people trying to get bereavement tickets and they weren't being treated the way that the company would have done had they had people on the front line. So I think we're going to see slower adoption initially as companies don't want to end up in that space because they want to have an opportunity to do something concrete, to test it out, and to recognize that humans need to lead the machine and they need to come after as well. Because as you were talking about in the prior conversation, when the hammer falls, it falls on us. AI doesn't care. We are going to all be the ones who have to explain, and we've got to bear the consequences.
No, that's so true. Hey, I feel like Larry King. We got a caller from, number 8818. Caller 8818 here. Asked a really interesting question here. The framing of questions has disproportionate impact on how an LM answers a question. Humans ask questions with bias, seeking the answer we want to hear, and AI is based is biased to agreeing. So how do we learn to ask questions without our own bias, which is an area you studied for a long time, embedded in the way we frame the question? This person obviously knows your work. What's the solution to that? And I thought we make decisions with bias. That's how we get decisions made. It's the unwanted bias we're trying to avoid. What do you say to that?
Well, I so appreciate this question. Thank you. First, most people do come to AI asking it a question in a way that really initiates confirmation bias. And the tools want to please us, right? We don't often come in and say, tell me what the biggest critic of this theory would say.
Yeah, pressure test our thoughts. Yeah.
And so that definitely is a problem. But I was giving actually a talk at my local library last night, and this exact question came up, and it was to somebody who wasn't that comfortable with LLMs, a much older person. And what I said is you can simply say to the tool, I want to ask you a question. I think it may contain some bias in it, the way that I'm asking it. Give me several ways to reframe the question so I can ask it with greater objectivity, and don't answer to try to please me. Don't answer based on what you know about me. Please give me whatever you can find that is recent and credible, and cite your sources.
Yeah, this is critical thinking. This is what we, the most important language is English. Like if you can, or whatever your native tongue, to be able to formulate an input prompt that guards against 150 some odd biases humans have is important. So just structuring how you engage with software, recognizing that the worst AI software you're using is today's. Whatever flaws you think it has now, wait a day, a week, a month. It's certainly, think about last year compared to even when I mentioned Gemini. The frequency in which I use Gemini today is vastly more than a year ago because it's better. It understands tonality, sentiment, references, traceability. It's just better, noticeably better. So I can't even imagine what the next 12 months will. But again, reading your book and making sure that we all understand there is science and art to smarter decisions, and it's even more important now than ever before. Is congratulations on your fourth book. Can't wait to have you on when you have your fifth. At the rate you're going, it's going to be next year sometime. We'll be talking about your fifth. So
It'll be before my third book. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are here with Cheryl Strauss Einhorn, author of The Human Edge, Smarter Decisions in the Age of AI, CEO of Decisive, professor at many multiple universities, and maybe we'll invite you over to our conference in October. We'd love to have you.
Great. Love that.
Well, hey, thanks for being on the show. We'll catch you in the green room. And of course,
thank you.
And congrats on the book. So.
Bray, a multi-best-selling author, the inventor of the internet, the founder, CEO, advisor to 12 startups. This was a fast hour, huh?
The fastest hour in the business, as you always say. We're definitely seeing that. And of course, there's a lot to talk about in this episode. So, but AI has already summarized everything. I think we have a post out already. It's out there. We are moving.
Yeah. It's value at the speed of need. Well, next week, we don't just bring inventors of greatest technology and humanity on our show.
Oh my God,
we sometimes bring prime ministers. Sometimes bring the first woman mayor of a large city in the world on our show. Next week, we have Malcolm Turnbull, former Prime Minister of Australia, and Lucy Turnbull, former mayor of Sydney, Australia. So the Turnbulls will be joining us. David Bray will continue to help us guide.
He's our third co-host. So yes.
Yeah. We're again, first ballot Hall of Fame inductee to DisrupTV. And we have Sherry Jacobs, author of The Unexpected Power of Boundaries, Rethinking the Rules, Risks, and Real Drivers of Innovation.
Really good book. It's a really good book. So
we're on our way of featuring north of 70 authors this calendar year on DisrupTV. We welcome your suggestions in terms of authors that can come and help expand our minds. We'll continue to do that. We'll try to make sure every episode has at least one author, and a stack of books behind me is evidence of how many authors we have on our show every year. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.